Welcome to Movie Oubliette, the film review podcast for movies that most people have mercifully forgotten.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Conrad, and in each episode, we drag a forsaken film out of the oubliette,
Discuss it and judge it to decide whether it should be set free
or whether it should be thrown back and consigned to oblivion forever. We review the films others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the Movie Oubliette. Hello and welcome to Movie Oubliette, a cross-hemisphere podcast with me, Conrad, in Cambridge, UK.
And I'm Dan, down here in Melbourne, Australia.
In each episode, we delve into our dungeon of forgotten films and pull out a gem to review and discuss together. And at the end, we'll decide whether it deserves to be released into the wild, to be appreciated once more, or whether it should just be tossed back into the oblivion of our oubliette. We'll mainly be looking at fantastic cinema, so horror, science fiction, and fantasy films, because they're just the ones that float our boat, I guess. Dan, how is your boat floating right now?
Oh, it's floating just fine. I'm struggling a little bit with jet lag because I have, in actual fact, been on holiday for a month in Europe. I attended my sister's wedding in Italy and ate all the delicious food. And also we went to Spain and soaked up the sun on the beach in Spain, Barcelona. But it all just seems like a distant memory now. But now I'm back.
Yes.
And you know what that means?
What does that mean?
It means we can respond to our listeners, all their questions and comments.
Yes, because we don't want to burst everyone's bubble, but actually the first 6 episodes we pre-recorded in advance. So it's not that we're incredibly rude and don't answer people. It's just that I've been releasing them while Dan suns himself in tropical climates, which isn't fair, I don't think, but there we go.
Oh, well.
So what do we have in our mailbag?
So, hang on, let's have a look here. I had a comment from a listener called Amy, and she said that I think she sings along to our theme song every time, on every episode, but instead of saying movie oubliette, she says movie boobliette, and has a bit of a laugh.
Oh, maybe we should change it.
We could indeed.
Seeing as nobody seems to know what oubliette actually is, which was a slight miscalculation on our part.
So what is an oubliette, Conrad?
What is an oubliette? So an oubliette is a form of prison cell that's accessible only from a hatch or a hole in a high ceiling. And the reason that I came across the term oubliette because it's in the film Labyrinth, where Hoggle, I love Hoggle, describes it as a place that you put people to forget about them. So that's where oubliette comes from. And quite a few people having fun pronouncing it too, because I was tweeting at the Super Horror Brothers, who have a fantastic podcast where they review horror films and keep abreast of the news in the horror world, because they were having their 100th episode and they wanted questions. And I asked them which Halloween film we should cover in our Halloween episode. Which one did they think is the most overlooked and underappreciated? And they've picked one for us. Mm-hmm. They've suggested that we look at Halloween H2O, which will be interesting in the context of the remake that's coming along this year.
Yeah.
Which is sort of a remake of H2O in a way. I don't know.
I was always under the impression that all the sequels were terrible. So I've only actually seen the first and second of the Halloweens and none of the other ones. So I'd be really interested to check out H20.
Yeah, I think that'll be fun. But yes, bless them, the Super Horror Brothers, when they talked about us, they referred to us as movie oblette or movie oblette, yeah, something like that. We were rhyming with omelette anyway, which so
movie omelette is my favorite breakfast item. I often choose it at the cafes.
It's tasty and nutritious.
Yes, and full of cheese.
Lashings of processed 80s cheese. Yeah.
I would also like to thank the people involved with designing our logo. So we have Anne Rabaglia, who did the background design, and Evan Heisman, who did the character design.
Yes, and Kirk Olmsted helped us out early on with concepts too, which was really great.
And the logo looks fabulous. I don't think we'd even had the logo finished by the time we recorded the 6th episode, so sorry for not mentioning you guys.
No, we didn't. It's true. And we've also had fun. I've had fun creating animated videos of segments of the show and putting them on YouTube. So check us out on YouTube because, yes, you can see our Evan's fantastic character designs come to life.
And they look so much more attractive than my real life face. I'm a lot slimmer. I've got a cooler haircut. Yeah.
Yeah, Evan really did paint us in a very, very nice light. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so Dan, what are you pulling out of the oubliette for us to dissect today?
Well, one moment while I go and fish it out.
Marvellous.
So there's something wrong with the electrics in this room at the moment. It's a lot of flickering lights. Can't quite, hang on. My torch has stopped working. Alright, I think I've found it. Got it. Okay.
Wow.
Coming back now. Right. So the film we'll be discussing this episode is a film from 2009, and it's called Pandorum. So it's directed by Christian Alvart, and it's written by Travis Malloy. It's starring Dennis Quaid, Ben Foster. Who Ben Foster I only know from 6 Feet Under. I don't know whether you watched that show, but he was in that.
I didn't know.
Great show, by the way. Also starring Cam Gigandet.
Yeah, I don't know how you say that.
I'm going to butcher these following names. So Antja Traore, Kang Lee, Eddie Rouse, and Norman Reedus.
Yeah, Norman Reedus is in there. Good old Daryl Dixon from The Walking Dead makes a brief appearance.
Yes, I don't watch Walking Dead, so I didn't know who that was.
I watched it for a full series and then got very, very bored.
Yeah, I've heard mixed reviews about that show, but it's still going, so people must love it.
Yes, and Daryl was always good, so Norman being in this is quite fun.
Dennis Quaid, I normally despise. I think
Really?
I don't know. I think he plays the same character every time. He for me, he's always been kind of the poor man's Kevin Costner, and I don't know.
See, I often see him referred to as the poor man's Harrison Ford, which is a fairly good comparison because Harrison Ford is always Harrison Ford in every movie he's in. I love Dennis. I think he's great.
I don't know.
He's been in a lot of films, some of them which we may find in the oubliette, actually. So Dreamscape, Enemy Mine, Inner Space, Dragonheart, and one of my personal favourites, Frequency, which I find a bit tear-jerking, actually. I love that movie.
Frequency wasn't too bad, actually. I did enjoy that film. It was a very interesting concept.
Yeah, I thought so.
So the plot of this film is your kind of usual sci-fi beginning. Everyone wakes up from hypersleep on a space station going to colonize a new planet because the resources from Earth have diminished. And so the main two leads, Dennis Quaid's character, which he's called Peyton, and Ben Foster's character, Bauer, wake up from hypersleep and they have amnesia. They don't know what's going on. The space station seems to be on the fritz. There's no electricity. They can't open any doors. They're trapped in this room, and Ben Foster manages to get out of the room through a vent, and he proceeds to find out what's going on. The main aim is to go get to the reactor to jumpstart the ship, but along the way he encounters a bunch of, I guess they're almost like zombies, almost alien zombie humanoid creatures, as well as other crew members of the ship that seem to know what's going on. And it turns into a survival of the fittest with many sharpened blades and a lot of quick cuts and shaky cam. He meets some crew members that help him along the way as he reaches the reactor, and then a bajillion twists at the end, which we will talk about.
So there are a few twists.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the plot. So we'll be right back to talk about it in the main discussion.
Can't wait.
So we are back to discuss Pandorum.
Yes.
Conrad, thoughts?
Well, isn't this a great example of noughties? Is that what we call the 2000s? Mm-hmm. Noughties sci-fi movie making.
Sure was.
It sure was. I mean, I have a particular fondness for people exploring derelict spacecraft. So Alien, even 2010, the sequel to 2001, where they're exploring the Discovery. Event Horizon,
correct, movie.
Which is a very interesting comparison to make because, of course, the director of Event Horizon's Paul W.S. Anderson, who is also a producer on this particular film. It's the same production team.
Yeah.
So it's the sort of film that should push my buttons and get me excited and intrigued about the mysteries of what's the situation. And having two characters wake up with amnesia just adds some extra spice, I guess.
Yeah.
And it also leads to, I mean, the first thing I thought when the movie started was, well, if nobody can remember who they are, there are going to be some twists here. And I think we should say there are some twists.
There are two. I mean, there are a lot of twists, but there are two big major twists towards the end. So I think we will get into more detail towards the end of this podcast, and we'll talk about the other things first.
Yeah, we'll give you a spoiler warning before we ruin the end of the movie for you.
Sure. I really liked the mystery of this film. I thought I was just constantly trying to guess what was going on and what was happening, and yeah, trying to put the pieces together and work it out. Yeah, I thought I liked it. You on the other hand?
Well, I think the major problem that I struggled with is just how much it feels like they took elements from lots of really, really great original movies, dumped them in a blender, hit the power switch, and then just turned the lighting down and hope that you wouldn't notice. I don't know. It's so reminiscent of so many films. I mean, obviously, the shadow of Alien looms large over every science fiction film made in its wake. And I think you've got a biomechanical ship that seems to be a living, breathing thing. The director talked about how he wanted it to be a character in the movie. You have the monster design. They are these, I think the technical term is troglofauna.
Okay.
Which is creatures who have adapted to living in darkness. So they're these pale, muscular humanoids who are largely naked, but have fashioned themselves a few strips of clothing that cover the most embarrassing parts that a stuntman would probably not want dangling around while they're doing battle. But they also seem to have fashioned these tube-like protuberances that stick out of their back. So their silhouette is very much like Giger's alien from Alien. So they're sort of a cross between Alien and the albino monsters in Neil Marshall's film The Descent from 2005.
I did think they were very similar.
Yeah.
They kind of reminded me of the Reavers as well from Serenity.
Oh, that's an interesting comparison.
I mean, essentially they were just fast zombies, really. And there were a few dated things from the noughties. The whole fast forward everything. You know, let's get these creatures looking scarier just by fast forwarding the footage and having a lot of shrieking. Um,
Yeah. See, that's something that I had trouble with as well, which is that I love the inventiveness that James Cameron brought to Aliens in terms of how he filmed the aliens themselves, because he knew, I think he says in the making of, that as humans who have grown up watching other humans move, it only takes a few frames of film before we recognize a human figure. Because the movements and the configuration of a human body is just so ingrained in us that we identify it immediately. So a man in a suit just looks like a man in a suit. So he's filming them backwards, he's undercranking them, he's overcranking them. They're upside down, the camera's upside down. He's doing everything he can to disguise what they are, and actually it works really well in Aliens, I think. What I don't like is what looks like, instead of planned ingenuity like that, it looks like post-production tinkering, because you look at the footage and you think, actually, this looks shit. This doesn't look scary at all. So I'm just going to cut out every other frame. Or like slow motion that's stop printed. That's another thing that I really hate, which is where they print double frames for every frame. And so you just get this jerky slow motion, and to me that's you didn't plan on the day, this isn't the way it was supposed to be, you've just realized that something isn't clear and isn't reading on screen, so you've done something in post-production. It all of that sort of thing just feels like tinkering to try to make the film work, because the footage you've got just doesn't, and I have less respect for that.
I think it did rely a lot on post, and I think the main problem with this movie is that it suffered budget-wise. Like there were moments with some of the CGI where it really didn't look at all convincing, and like a lot of the fight choreography was just. She had no idea what was going on. There was a foot going here, and then just flickering lights, and then 1,000 cuts a second.
Yeah,
it was obviously not really choreographed. It's almost as if they just shot a bunch of vague fight scenes and thought, hey, we'll just cut it all together and it will hopefully look like they're having some sort of a tussle. But yeah, it was quite confusing at moments what was actually happening and who was getting stabbed or eaten or whatever. And yeah, it did suffer a lot from that.
It did, and especially when, I mean, we've talked about this before when we were talking about Willow, the Tirisleen sequence, with how beautifully those action scenes are mounted, and how you know where everybody is in relation to everybody else and exactly what's happening, and various simultaneous pieces of action are set up and then paid off, and it's so satisfying to watch. And I just saw the new Mission Impossible film yesterday, and the action scenes in that are just incredible, because again, you can see where everybody is in relation to everyone, and you can see who's punching whom and what's happening, and things lead up to a climax, and there are peaks and troughs, and then you watch Pandorum and it's just flash, 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 flash.
Yeah.
Don't know what happened, but it was exciting.
A lot of very, very dark scenes where you could barely even make out anything. The lighting was, I don't know, some of the scenes were pretty cool with the lighting. I liked some of the corridor scenes. It looked the kind of light at the end of the tunnel and silhouettes. I thought that was quite cool, but yeah, some of the other scenes it's very hard to make out what was going on.
And it did undermine some of the jumps as well, because there's a sequence where Bowers has finally escaped the claustrophobic tunnel that he's pushing his way through. And the first person he encounters is Nadia. Yes.
She's apparently the three survivors that he meets up with, their names are never actually mentioned at all.
No.
In the movie.
Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I guess maybe it wouldn't come up, but I don't know. But yes, she's German. She was a geneticist. and she has survived on her wits. Again, this is just so reminiscent of Aliens, though, isn't it? Because the first person they meet in the colony when they're investigating that is Newt, and she survived in tunnels in rags through her wits and ingenuity. It's just very familiar. But he's chasing her because she's running off, as Newt does. And then I think he sees a silhouette in a corridor and he's talking to it, and then he discovers it's a body that's hanging from the ceiling. But actually, I had to turn up the brightness on my TV to see what it was that he was talking to. The whole jump didn't work because I couldn't see anything.
It's too dark. Yeah, it was too dark. And the jump kind of, it was unexpected because you didn't really know what to expect.
No.
You were just kind of looking into blackness.
Yeah.
And then just, the jump scare just, it came out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, apparently the film was so dark that he had to sign a special technical waiver, because when it comes back from the lab, if more than a certain percentage of the frame is black for a long period, they get you to sign a waiver to say this isn't a flaw.
Right.
This was intended. It's not the lab's fault. It's mine.
So this film was a German production. So the director's German. Most of the cast, apart from the leads, were German as well. Except Kang Lee, so the Vietnamese character, who played, his character was Man? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he I looked him up. He was actually he's like an MMA fighter. So he's very, very highly trained in martial arts, but they really didn't use him.
No. Which I suppose credit to the film. He is supposed to be a farmer.
Yeah,
so
I guess so.
The fact that he's not a kickboxing champion is probably good.
I guess so.
Because it could be a racial stereotype, perhaps, if...
Yeah, that's true.
The only Asian knows martial arts and can kick ass. Although he does do a reasonably good job with a staff.
Oh, yeah, he does. He does. I also found it quite funny that, I don't know, this seems to be a thing with sci-fi movies where there are people surviving through the elements. They always seem to cut off their sleeves. Why? Just to show their big muscly arms, I guess. But everyone's got cut off sleeves and cut off trousers. I don't know.
Yeah, and everyone emerges from hypersleep naked except for something that covers their genitals, and they have perfect muscle tone.
That's the thing that's always bothered me with in sci-fi movies, the characters waking up from hypersleep. They shouldn't they have hair down to their ankles? Shouldn't they have big bushy beards? I don't know.
Well, yeah, but maybe in this case they didn't do too bad a job, because Dennis Quaid and Ben Foster have beards. If I remember rightly.
Yeah, they did.
And I seem to remember that Ben Foster has long fingernails when they have a close-up of his fingers.
I didn't notice that bit.
Yeah.
There's one really cool scene that's kind of not really related to the story, but when he's shaving, he's using this laser shaver, and it shoots out this laser beam that gives him a perfect shave every time.
It does. I want one of those.
Yeah, me too.
They're great. He didn't seem to be suffering with any kind of rash afterwards. So
No, not at all. No,
although it was a pretty
shave.
magical razor, because he only got halfway through when he was interrupted by something, and then in the next shot when he investigates the thing he was interrupted by, it's finished.
Oh.
So he doesn't spend the rest of the movie with half a beard, which I would have really enjoyed.
That would have been great. I also felt really sorry for Ben Foster's character. So, what was his name? Bauer. Because he kept falling. Just constantly falling. Just the floors giving way, or him falling down a shaft, or... He really got beat up just by gravity.
He does not have a good time. And meanwhile, Dennis Quaid just sits in a control room saying, "Bauer, do you read? Bauer, do you read?" And that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
He got a cushy job, I think.
Now it's time for Random Trivia.
Okay, so now it's one of my favourite parts of the podcast. It's where Dan thrills us with a piece of completely random trivia. Dan, what have you got for us this time?
Right, so I've got two bits of trivia. So Ben Foster, the actor, there's a scene where he eats a bug, a cricket.
Oh, yes.
So one of the other characters says, "Are you hungry?" And he says, "Yes." And then she hands him a cricket. And he proceeds to put it in his mouth and crunch on it. And apparently Ben Foster insisted on eating a real live insect, not a dead one, not a fake one, a real one. So that's a real delicious crunchy cricket he's munching on.
He's method.
He certainly is. Another bit of trivia was there's one of the child creatures, humanoid creatures, that ends up killing the Vietnamese character is played by Asia Luna Momand, and she is the daughter of the director.
Oh,
Christian Alvart.
So he said to his daughter, your big break in movies is going to be playing a pasty, semi-naked monster that murders Vietnamese people.
Yes.
Great.
I know.
Thanks, Dad.
Probably a very proud father. I
So
think,
glamorous.
I think she ends up in a lot of his movies. I looked at her filmography, and I think she ends up in a lot of his later films as well.
And not the only relative to appear in the film, I remember.
Oh, yes?
Yes. Did you not know this? Ben Foster's brother is in the movie.
Oh, yes?
John Foster. He has a brief appearance. Do you remember there's a guy that wakes up in his sleep, hypersleep tube and gets out only to be immediately eaten by lots of hunters?
Well, that's a pretty confronting scene. Out of all the scenes, I was actually pretty shocked by that. My jaw was agape.
Yes, I can't imagine a worse way of waking up.
No, getting eaten and getting stabbed through the top of your head with a spear is it's not my idea of a refreshing morning.
And that is how Ben Foster decided to treat his brother.
So good.
Yes, indeed. So, yes, that's our trivia moment.
Yeah. So what did you think of the score?
So the score is by a guy named, and I'm not sure how to pronounce this. Is it Mitchell or is it Michael? It's Michl.
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Michael, maybe.
When you have two consonants together, I give up.
I struggle, yeah. I think it might be Michael, Britsch, Britsch. And I have not seen anything else, heard anything else by him. And to be honest, I found it very generic. It's the sort of sound design stroke, generic rhythmic churning mess that I'm sort of accustomed to in modern filmmaking. And I just find it fairly distracting most of the time. But often it just sort of blends into the background as this musical, well, not even musical, just sound wallpaper.
I felt like it was too ubiquitous. It was just always present, and it got to the point where it lost its impact. I don't think there was any moments at all where there wasn't score. There was just constant score just churning away.
Yeah.
And so, it just, the tense scenes just didn't really have as much power as they could have had.
No.
And I do agree, very, very generic. No musical themes that I could even pick out. No recurring motifs or anything. It was a whole bunch of swells of brass and electronic glitches and percussion.
Wailing voices as well, sometimes as well. So, yeah. And whenever you use music in that way, as you say, ubiquitous, just was wallpaper slathered over the sound design from start to finish, I always feel as though it shows a lack of confidence in your film, that you feel as though you've got to just slap this stuff on to make it more exciting or more engaging or feel as though something's happening, whereas huge swathes of silence would actually have served this film well, I think.
so well. Because I find silence much more tense than like sustained strings or, ominous tones, because you really don't know what's going to happen.
No, and I mean, sometimes you get used to the rhythm of it. So some horror films, I noticed that you've got the music sort of, if the composer is on the scene sort of making suspenseful music, then you know nothing is going to happen. And then as soon as the orchestra dies out, you brace yourself for the stinger because you know it's coming. So actually, I really admire composers who break that rhythm and surprise you.
Yeah.
Like even halfway through a measure, all of a sudden you will get a sting. And I think that's quite cunning. But in this, it's just a wash. And it's almost in some cases like he leant on a synthesizer and let the tones run out for 5 minutes while he ate a sandwich or something. I think composers call that a working lunch. Christian Henson used that phrase.
Okay.
When he was working on the score to the Alien Isolation game, he used to have quote unquote working lunches where he would just sort of hold 3 keys down.
Also, the color grade I noticed was the generic sci-fi amber teal color grade, where everything was either yellow or blue.
Yeah.
And also the glow sticks were just lighting effects, really, because they were often different colors as well. There was a yellow glow stick, there was a green one, there was a red one. Like, surely they shouldn't be different colors.
Well, supposedly, the director says that the coloring of the different scenes meant something. But he said that on the commentary, but then he didn't explain exactly what it was. Yeah, very dark movie with lots of very obvious color grading.
So what did you think of the plot itself?
I guess you could give it props for being sort of ahead of its time. I mean, how many films had there been at this point where Earth was a disaster and we were all going to have to get onto a ship and colonize somewhere else? Because there have been a lot since then. So I'm thinking of Alien Covenant and Passengers as well. So I guess it's ahead of its time in that sense. I'm trying to give it some some props here because so much of the rest of it is so derivative of other things. So I've mentioned the aliens comparison. I think the ever-present threat of the titular deep space nervous condition, Pandorum. See, I thought that was going to be the name of the ship, but it's not. It's a combination of paranoia and delirium, I think. So the idea is that if you're in space for a long time, you go crazy, basically. And it sort of plays like the nervous disease that befalls Michael Bihn's character in The Abyss, which is from 1989. So even starting with handshaking and developing into full-on homicidal rampages.
There was the same thing happened in Event Horizon, right? With Sam Neill's character.
He goes crazy. Yeah.
I mean,
to be honest, in terms of the plot, I struggled to track what was actually going on. I mean, I understood that Bauer was being sent to sort of kickstart the engine because if you wake up and all the lights are flickering, then obviously you need to put another dime in the meter or something. Something's not right. And the revelations that follow after that, are we allowed to talk about these yet?
Hey listeners, Dan here. So this is a forewarning to the following spoilers that we will be discussing. So if you don't want the entire film ruined and spoiled for you, please fast forward to the 41:11 mark. Thanks very much. Back to the show. Okay, some minor spoilers. So the alien humanoid creatures, it turns out they are the people from the ship, so the crew members. So all the humans on the ship, when they're in hypersleep, they're fed this gene accelerator that mutates their genes so they adapt to the new environment of being in space, and I guess eventually when they reach the planet, will adapt to their planet as well. So it turns out that these creatures are actually humans that had been mutating, and it also turned out that this is another spoiler. So the two characters, Bao and Peyton, wake up thinking they'd only been asleep for 8 years, but in fact they'd been asleep for 900 years. And in that 900 years, the humans had evolved quite significantly to be these savage beasts. And yeah, I don't know. I kind of liked I kind of liked that twist because it's something I've never really seen before.
What, the whole you've been in hypersleep for much longer than you think you have? Because that's Ripley's experience in Aliens, although it doesn't really serve much purpose there.
Yeah, but I mean, also the fact that the creatures end up being just humans that had evolved or mutated.
Yeah, I guess I can't remember seeing something like that before.
I also felt that they revealed it too early.
Well,
I felt they could have. Yeah, I felt that they could have revealed it a bit later, so that it would have been a bit of more of a shock than just go, oh, they're just humans.
yeah, I suppose there are so many twists in this movie. There are a few twists that happen so close together towards the end that I kind of threw my hands up and thought, I don't know what's happening anymore. So I think if you'd had, they're not aliens, they're human beings as well, I think it would have been a lot to take on in the last.
It would have been like
10
so many
minutes.
twists. Yeah, I guess so.
Twist upon twist upon twist.
So shall we go into major spoilers now?
Okay, so spoilerific time.
Okay.
The people who woke up and couldn't remember who they were, one of them isn't the person that they thought they were. There's a shocker.
So so Bauer finds out about what happened to the ship. So what happened there were 3 pilots, I guess, or 3 in charge, and one of them goes completely crazy, gets the Pandorum crazy, and kills the 2 other pilots, and then sabotages the ship and then goes into hypersleep.
He sort of experiences some sort of existential breakdown, loses faith in the mission, and then tells everybody to go off into the bowels of the ship and become cannibals.
Bauer finds out about this, and then we cut back to Dennis Quaid's character, Peyton, and then a guy somehow slithers into the room through these pipes. So Peyton, gives him a wash and some clothes, and this guy turns out to be Gallo, and he starts spouting all this stuff, and you think, oh, this guy, he's got the Pandorum. Maybe this guy was one of the pilots that had killed off the rest of the crew, and you think, oh no, this guy's the evil guy. But then it turns out that Peyton is just hallucinating, and Peyton is actually Gallo.
Yeah.
And they are the same person, and he injects a sedative into himself that does nothing.
No, which was odd, wasn't it? Because the whole point of that fight that he was having with Gallo, Gigandet? I don't know how you pronounce that.
Yeah.
He was in the Twilight movies, I think.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So they have a big fight because Peyton wants to inject Gallo and subdue him, but he ends up just injecting himself because he's the only one there and it doesn't affect him anyway.
Yeah, the sedative seems to sedate the original Peyton character, but doesn't sedate the Gallo character, and he's full-blown evil.
Yep.
And then so when Bauer finally kickstarts the reactor and the ship bursts back into life, and he goes back to the control room where Dennis Quaid is, and Dennis Quaid goes full-on crazy on him. And then, okay, massive spoilers now. So this was the oddest scene was when Bauer decides to shoot some wiring or whatever with this hugely powerful stun gun that is obviously not going to stun anyone. It's going to kill everyone. He shoots the control panel, and the control panel cover flicks off and hits the window of the ship, and then that's enough to crack the window, and then water comes in. Oh yeah, huge spoiler. They're not in space. They're in water.
Yeah.
So they open up the windows and they say, "Oh, where are the stars gone?" And then they see a whole bunch of glowing fish, and they've never been in space this whole time. They've actually landed on the planet that they were going to, which is called Tarnus.
Yes.
So for what, 900 years, they'd been on the planet. Someone had just opened up a window, they would have figured that out. But no one opens up a window.
Well, this is the thing, because I think isn't it the reason that Gallo went crazy is because he looked out of the window and he couldn't see any stars. So he decided that there was nothing out there, and it's this Lovecraftian fear of the void. And
is that why?
yeah, I think he's supposed to have gone crazy because he thinks they've reached the edge of space and they're staring into the void, and the void stared back at him and he went great. I don't know. But you would have thought that in all that time, somebody would have noticed fish going by. It's not like 800 years later when Nadia suddenly goes, oh, look, a jellyfish.
Yeah. But I mean, surely there's more than one window on the spaceship. Surely.
You would hope.
Like, surely every room has a little peephole to see, where you're going. But no, everyone just likes darkness.
Yeah, apparently, darkness and tubes.
Right. I also found, so he breaks the window, water bursts into the spaceship. The spaceship goes into auto, like, dispel mode and shoots out all the tubes of hypersleep human beings. And then they land on this planet that doesn't look like a real planet whatsoever.
No.
I don't know why they couldn't just film something on Earth and just chucked a couple of different stars or moons in the horizon, because it just looked, I don't know, the most unconvincing CGI planet you've ever seen.
Yeah. Where they live happily ever after. There was supposed to be a sequel, I think.
There was supposed to be a trilogy, apparently.
Yeah.
So, but because this movie just flopped, it just never eventuated. But there's apparently a cult following for this movie, and there's been a huge petition signed for the sequel, but nothing has happened.
Yeah, there's a whole Facebook group, and I might give a shout out to them when we launch this episode. Because there are people that really enjoyed this movie, that it's got quite the cult following, and there are people that would like a director's cut, and they'd like a sequel, and they'd like a prequel, so you can see how it all happened. And it's difficult because the film cost $33 million and made 20.6, so it's going to be very difficult for them to justify that, I think.
Coming to you live from the Movie Oubliette Theatre, it's the prestigious Mobley Awards.
So it's that time. This is our very special segment, the Mobley Awards, where we nominate our favorite things in a bunch of curious categories. And we always started off with our favorite quote. And over to you, Conrad.
Yeah, I had trouble with this, to be honest, because I didn't think much of the dialogue was particularly memorable. It wasn't bad.
Yeah.
But nothing really leapt out at me as memorable. What about you?
Yes, I would 100% agree. Nothing bad, nothing iconic. And I felt like some of the more powerful speeches that were delivered by the characters were over top of either quite erratic editing and sound design or a lot of quick cuts so that you didn't really hear the words. So yeah, that's what I thought anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I even tried looking at the IMDb page for memorable quotes, and the things they had there weren't particularly interesting.
Yeah.
So let's move on to our next category, which is most noughties moment, should we call it?
It's funny because we've done, I think, exclusively 80s movies. And then we've just jumped forward 2 decades to the noughties. So the most noughties moment in this movie, I think, will be the quick cuts and the shaky cam for sure, but also the fast-forwarded footage of the creatures when they're chasing them. You can tell it's just been fast-forwarded, and that was very, very prevalent in the noughties, especially with all those Japanese remake horror movies where everything is jerky and erratic, and I guess to make it unnerving, But it got a bit too much after a while when every horror film was doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah. I think this is a time when the shift from analog editing to digital editing, I think everything had pretty much switched over at that point. And I think everybody had their favorite digital editing tools, and by golly, they were going to use them wherever they could. Just keep pressing the button. And I think the same could be said of the color grading. I think digital color grading was such a new and exciting tool in the noughties, and boy, did they overuse it in this movie. You've got primary colored scenes from one sequence to the next, but of course, ever present was the sci-fi blue and orange.
Yeah. There are many scenes where it was so obvious, almost as if one side of the frame was yellow and the other side was just entirely blue. And I mean, I get it looks good, but I guess because we're aware of that popular color grade, it gets a bit like
Tiresome.
Overused and tiresome.
So, best hair. I don't think anyone had particularly remarkable hair in this.
No, not anything iconic, I guess. There was one character, Leland, who is the guy that traps the characters and proceeds to tie them up and get them ready to be eaten. So he's got, I guess, more 90s hair. He's got dreadlocks.
Yeah, I guess so. Everybody else, it's just remarkable how great their hair is, considering they've either been in cryosleep for years or they've been trying to survive on scraps in a dark spaceship for years with pasty, bald hunters trying to eat them.
Yes, sure.
And besides that, they seem to be salon ready. I mean, they look great.
Yeah.
At least a little better than you might expect.
That's true.
Favorite scene?
Favorite scene? There was one scene where they were being chased by the creatures. So Bauer has escaped into this big cargo storage room, and he has got the Nadia character as well as the Man character, the Vietnamese guy. And they're getting attacked by that one creature, and they're having a really hard time overpowering him. And eventually they do overpower him. It's just a very visceral scene. There's a lot of there are a lot of shaky cam and quick cuts, but you really feel for the characters because they're completely getting annihilated by this creature, and then they finally manage to get the upper hand. And I found that, I don't know, I did find that a really powerful scene.
Okay. I think the standout sequence for me was the reactor sequence where Bauer covers himself with, is it skin?
Yeah.
Something? He's disguising himself.
I thought it was skin, but I mean, so the creatures are eating humans like they're oranges, peeling the skin away, throwing it on the ground, eating all the good parts.
Yeah, we're like potatoes. You just leave the skin. So actually, the skin's the good part. I don't know. Anyway,
but it's where all the protein is.
Oh, no. So he has to crawl over. I don't know. Are they sleeping or?
Yeah,
I
think they're sleeping.
Okay, so the reactor is where they all like to congregate on the floor in this sort of mass of pale, oozing, sweaty bodies. And there's a reactor in the middle, and he has to sort of crawl over all of these nasty hunters to jumpstart the reactor and kick the ship into gear and save the day. And I actually thought, from all of the frenetic, ridiculous darkness that we had before that a quiet moment of suspense was quite fun. So, and then, of course, it all explodes into craziness after that. So that was quite satisfying.
You've also got the Man character up above him trying to hold this entire platform with one arm while Bauer slowly and cautiously crawls over these creatures.
Yeah, which I'm not sure physics would really work in that situation. But
well, I don't know.
Hey, these farmers, they're tough.
Yeah, farmers are tough, and it has been a few years that they've been on the ship, so
Yeah.
push-ups.
Yeah, he's been just doing pull-ups the whole time.
Exactly.
Okay, most cliched horror moment. What do you think is particularly cliched in this movie?
I would probably say the sound design of the creatures. Just a lot of screeching and a lot of clicking. That clicking sound that aliens and monsters always seem to make from the noughties onwards.
Yes, I would agree. And actually, it's quite reminiscent of Predator. Well, certainly that was the thing that it reminded me of. That and Norman Reedus covering himself with oil to disguise himself from the monsters.
Oh, yes.
I'm not sure why that works better than skin, but actually it didn't, did it? Because Norman didn't get very far, bless him.
No, not at all.
But yes, the predator noises and the what is it? Is it pigs or something? Those screeching noises they always use.
I don't know. I assume it's just an old woman just screeching in a room.
Well, I know in Lord of the Rings, the ring wraiths is Peter Jackson's wife, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Don't underestimate the power of a woman screaming for sound design.
Did you have a favourite special effect?
So my favorite special effect was the creature design themselves. So I saw some behind the scenes footage of the movie, and it was all prosthetics. So no CGI in terms of the creatures. Everything was prosthetics and makeup effects. And I think they did really well. I mean, I guess they weren't hugely original in design, but they were very effective, and I did definitely feel the menace and the terror that they exuded.
Yeah, they were threatening, and but they were still plausible as an evolution of mankind. I thought, that's the thing, that because it's Stan Winston's studio, and they always try to design characters, not monsters. So they try to think about the story and try to create something that is plausible in the context of the story and works really well for the scenes that the director's thinking of. And I think they did a great job again. It's not a ridiculous, implausible monster. It's actually something that's sort of creepy because it's realistic, I suppose, in a sense.
I do agree, because the main, I guess, king of the creatures did have a sense of humanity to him. Like, you could see it in his eyes. He wasn't just a all-out vicious animal. And also the fact that when he confronts the man character and they have a duel, he throws him a spear so they can have a fair fight. So there's still some humanity left in those creatures, and it was conveyed well through the prosthetics.
Yeah. Quite sad that Stan Winston passed away during the production. I think that was the one they were working on when sadly we lost Mr. Winston. Moving on to your specialist area, sound effects. Did you have a favourite sound effect?
I mean, I guess most cliche sounds were the creatures, and they were very prominent throughout the film. So, I mean, everything else was good. Like, there wasn't anything that was stand out. You've got your usual, when you open cryosleep tube, there's always a sound, which you've come to expect. You've got your
years of BO escaping.
Exactly, just a fart that's been building up in the tube. It's finally been released, and you've got your ship sounds that sound like bending metal, and I don't know, nothing to stand out.
No, I didn't think so. I thought it was perfectly fine. Nothing stood out as particularly egregious. There were no Wilhelms, I noticed.
That's very true.
So bonus points for not having a Wilhelm. Do we want to give a star rating for Fake Blood? It's quite a bloody movie.
I mean, there is actually a decent amount of blood. I mean, it's mainly the characters that only seem to appear for 10 seconds. You've got Ben Foster's brother that wakes up from cryosleep, and there's a decent amount of blood there. And there's Norman Reedus's character. I think he gets dragged off and viciously mauled. And Yeah, and when they're also attacking the creatures, there's a decent amount of blood. The creatures seem to have very dark blood. It's almost black.
Yeah, but the human blood isn't the noughties brown mush that you usually get in these films. I thought it was actually, pretty good for fake blood. And no CGI blood.
Exactly.
I don't think.
I mean, that's one thing I really admired about the film. Apart from the external shots of the space station and the planets and certain other scenes, everything was practical. All the sets were practical. All the prosthetics and the fake blood were all practical effects. I think it really made the film more convincing in that respect.
Yeah, they created a world that you could buy into, I think. It was very gritty. And so, funniest scene, because, of course, Dan, you're famous for finding the most appalling scenes hilarious. Which appalling scene did you find hilarious in this movie?
So I would say the funniest scene, and I think you also agree, was the emergence of the Galo character into the room that the Dennis Quaid character, Peyton, is situated. So the Gallo character emerges through a whole bunch of rubber tubing, and he gets burst into the room all covered in oily slime. I actually, the sound design for that was ridiculous because it's all slurpy. It's like, what is going on? And then, behold, a naked man.
Never a bad thing to happen to you. Naked man slithers into the room. I think for me, I did laugh a little bit when the king of the hunters threw Man his spear so that they could have a fair fight. I mean, again, it's very reminiscent of Predator.
Yes.
I don't know. It just seems like, why don't you just kill him and eat him? It didn't seem to me that they had an honor system, particularly when they were devouring humans and leaving aside our potato skins.
Oh, yes. I mean, there's one scene as well where after the three crew members manage to kill one of the creatures and they're running away, then the other creatures just start devouring their fallen brethren. In terms of honor, I think it's pretty low.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, I think that will be our Moobly Awards.
Yes.
Right, we're back, and it's final verdict time. Should we rescue this film? Should we release it from the hypersleep of oubliette to frolic on the planet of Tanis? Or should we hurl it back in there for another 800 years while the cannibals tap on the screen and wait to get inside to the delicious treat that awaits them?
That's the most creative introduction to the final verdict I think we've ever heard.
It's ridiculous. Sorry.
I was engaged for sure.
Okay. Well, so Dan, what is your final verdict? I mean, you'd seen the movie before.
Yeah, so I'd seen Pandorum a few years ago, and I do have to admit, it seemed better then than it did now, but I still enjoy it. I think it delves into the horror sci-fi genre in a good way, and although it doesn't do a huge amount of new and original things, I still think it does what it does well. Yeah, I agree. There are problems with the lighting, a lot of very dark scenes where you can't see anything, and some of the plot was very out there, especially the twists at the end. But I was engaged, and I felt like the mystery really hooked you in, and you were constantly trying to guess what was going on and what was happening. Yeah, what did you think, Conrad?
Well, I had problems with how derivative it was. I felt as though it's a B movie. it's in a particular genre. And but rather than do something that I really love in those B movies, which is take an original nugget of a concept, even if some of the execution is familiar, there's a central nugget of an idea that's really interesting. But with this one, I just felt as though lots of pieces from other films had just been dumped into a blender and turned on, and then this thing was spewed out. I mean, there are obvious references to Event Horizon, obviously, The Descent as well, The Abyss, Alien, Aliens, Predator. It just feels very derivative for me. There are lots of things about it that I like. I like the fact that there is an international cast. One of the central cast members speaks a foreign language throughout and is never subtitled, which I think is great.
Yeah.
There's an inclusivity to this survival tale. It's not just white, beautiful 20-somethings, which I appreciated. I think there's a lot of ingenuity in the way they pulled off the film. I mean, particularly the production design, although it's borrowing heavily from the worn-down biomechanical worlds of Alien and Aliens. He did manage to get, the director and the production designer managed to get a lot out of their 12 sets and just constantly repurpose them to get the 40 or 50 locations that you see throughout the film. So, there's a lot of ingenuity there. But the action choreography, the way that the effectiveness of the monsters was entirely achieved in post-production with tinkering rather than ingenuity on the set, for me, it just makes it not particularly remarkable. I don't think it's a bad movie. I tend to like things that are either that have an element that's really unique and interesting, so you really enjoy them, or they're so bad that it's hilarious to watch them because they're terrible. And for this, it's just kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
There's nothing terrible about it.
I would say it's a step above the middle. Like I feel like there is a good movie in there. There's just a lot of things in the way preventing it to be a good movie. Yeah, so some of the lighting and some of the editing with the quick cuts and the shaky cam. I agree the production design was amazing, that they achieved so much with such limited resources. And I did feel like I was in this space station world. I felt like we were going places. I didn't feel... It felt like it was kind of gearing towards something. I thought the kind of more claustrophobic scenes when Bauer is escaping out of the control room were really effective in terms of just feeling very enclosed. Obviously some lighting issues. It did feel really tense in those moments. And then when it got to the point where he was getting chased by the creatures with the erratic editing, then it got a little bit too much and you didn't really know what was going on, or you couldn't really see what was happening. I'd also like to mention that this is the director Christian Elvart's third film. I'm sure his first film was very, very low budget, and his second film, Antibodies, I think got him this gig. I feel like maybe he's still inexperienced. He's still finding his feet as a director and trying to figure out things. I believe this is his first sci-fi horror film as well, so maybe it was a genre he wasn't very accustomed to. He's a director I'm definitely going to look out for in the future, and any films that I see his name on, I will check out for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this movie tried and for the most part didn't succeed, but I think it's going in the right direction.
So what are we going to do then? Because I think we might be at opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of what we do with it.
Yeah. Well, I guess this is that time where we can't decide, and I would want this film to be released.
I think, in all honesty, I couldn't recommend it to somebody. I think for me, if I just wanted to watch a B sci-fi movie, maybe I might put it on, but I don't think I would watch it again. So I don't think there's anything remarkable about it. So I would toss it back into obscurity. So this has never happened before in this podcast, but we are going to have to toss the coin of fate.
The coin of fate.
Ooh.
Yes, so you pick heads or tails? Which one would you go for?
I will go for heads.
Okay, so heads, it escapes the oubliette. Tails, it gets tossed back in.
Oh.
Here it goes.
Here it goes. Yes, it's heads.
It's heads. Oh, no.
Amazing. I'm doing this for Pandorum and all the crew and cast involved. I feel like I'm representing their team.
You think they deserve to live,
I do.
to go forth.
They can live their life on another planet.
Marvellous.
Be gone, Pandorum.
Oh, look at them go. Disappointing result from my perspective, but
wow.
There we go.
So, Conrad, what will we be looking at next episode?
Well, we're plunging back in the decades now, and instead of 80s, dipping our toes into the 70s with a science fiction conspiracy thriller called Capricorn 1.
Wow. I haven't actually seen this movie, and prior to meeting you, I'd never even heard of this film.
Well, it's one of my favourites mainly because, well, I know it through Jerry Goldsmith, who wrote the score, and it's one of his really vicious action scores that he's well known for. So that's how I came to find it.
Exciting.
Yes, so post-Watergate sci-fi conspiracy thriller with James Brolin, Sam Waterston, and O.J. Simpson.
What?
Yeah.
I did not know he delved into acting.
He did, yeah. I mean, he's mostly known in the acting field for being in the Naked Gun movies, but he is in this. I think this might have been his first screen appearance. So
Wow.
we have that to look forward to. And another thing we have to look forward to is that we will be joined by a guest for the first time on this podcast.
What?
Yes.
I didn't know this. No, I didn't know this. My future replacement, I assume.
Yes, I thought I'd better start auditioning people for when you go on holiday and sun yourself in Italy for weeks on end.
Yeah. I mean, I do that every second week, though. You know. This podcast is so lucrative.
Yes, so we'll have a guest, so tune in next time to find out who that is.
Also, because we'll have a third person, they may have the winning vote for the outcome of the film.
So no coin of fate next week for sure. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Movie Oubliette. Please follow us on our social channels, Twitter, Instagram. All of our socials are under the tag Movie Oubliette, and if you're not sure how to spell oubliette, it is
O-U-B-L-I-E-T-T-E.
And let's hear that again.
O-U-B-L-I-E-T-T-E.
no episode would be complete without 2 plays of that terrible jingle.
I do know that some of our listeners really enjoy that segment, so we'll keep doing it.
Marvellous. Tell us what you thought about the final outcome, what happened with this film, whether you agreed with the outcome.
The outcome of tossing a coin.
It's a fine-tuned critical tool, tossing a coin. So hashtag Team Conrad, hashtag Team Dan. Who are you with? And also, don't forget to rate and review us on whichever platform you're listening to us on, because it really helps us out.
More reviews and ratings, please.
Yes. I hope you join us again in the dungeon for Movie Oubliette. I'm Conrad.
And I'm Dan.
Goodbye for now.
Goodbye.
We review the films others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the Movie Oubliette.
Bauer, do you copy? Bauer, do you copy? Bauer, do you read? Bauer, do you copy? Bauer, do you read?